Thank you for joining us for Behind the Bower. This week is a little unique in that our podcast recording studio was closed for vacation. So Casey Murano is joining us via a Zoom interview and is telling us more about her current exhibit located in the Terrace Gallery, Returning to Water. We hope that you'll enjoy this video.
Casey. I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia, so not too far from the Bower Center. And then I went to school in Richmond, Virginia, and I currently live in Summers County, West Virginia, at an intentional community called Bethlehem Farm. So my art practice really is in dialogue with that place. The work we do on a day-to-day basis is low-income home repair. We teach sustainable practices and have a garden, and we host service retreats. So every day I'm seeing interesting things of like, ooh, look at the pattern on this door, or like that's how that like this particular vegetable grows and flowers, and all of those things I'm kind of responding to in the drawings and paintings and things that I make. Studied art in college, and I really liked the official name of the major. It was Visual and Media Arts Practice, and that helped me to really recognize like, oh, like art isn't just about like making beautiful products, like that can be a part of it, but a lot of it is about this like process and like just showing up to it every day. But I was at a liberal arts college, which I realized was important to me because I just love learning in general. So I took classes in many different like humanities departments. I ended up minoring in geography, but I was in like the English department a lot. Um, and even departments that I didn't touch, I find myself reading about now. Like I read books about math sometimes, or just being like, mathematics are really cool. Or science that I'm experiencing from like working in the garden. So yeah, I'm art making is kind of like, I guess, primary way of seeing the world, but it's like I have that kind of as my focus so that I can be open to all these other things too. I think I've carried a sketchbook since like age 4 in various like capacities. And in college or in high school, I took like art classes. And I think that's when I was like, oh, yeah, I could see myself as an art teacher. Um, and so, yeah, I see myself like making art and also like teaching in some capacity. Yeah, some of my favorites are crayons. Still love those. And watercolor, colored pencil. I also love a ballpoint pen. Like, that's one of my favorite things to draw with. And in general, I like to work on paper and different kinds of paper. Like I'll go to a book sale sometimes and get a stack of books for reading and for also like tearing up and like making into things or drawing on. And I like paper too because I can do some kind of cyclical processes. Like in the exhibit, there's some pulp paper pieces that I made by ripping up books or old sketchbooks, and then I turn it into a textured surface that I get to paint on. So it helps me again to see like art pieces have like different stages sometimes in their lifespan. Sometimes like a painting is its stop or it's like rest stop for a little while, and then it turns into a different form. Yeah, so this show has pieces from the last 3 years mainly. It's kind of like a sampling, and I was thinking about it a lot in the like, this is kind of what's happened in the 3 years since I graduated college. And my senior thesis for my like art classes was these returning to water paintings. Not these specific ones, but it was like that style. And when I made those paintings at the initial point, it was like, oh, like, where'd those come from? That's bigger than what I'm usually doing because I'm usually just like in a sketchbook, like experimenting, and then to like create like a finished 4 by 4 foot work was like, oh, that's just a culmination of these last 4 years. And I could see like how all those little fragments um had prepared me, I guess, for like making those paintings. So I think a lot about cyclical practices and processes, as I mentioned with the pulp paper. So like I guess having their turning to water exhibits kind of like me reflecting on those themes, and also a lot about watersheds. Because I made a lot of the early paintings during COVID. And so the way I was finding community and connection was both spending time in the studio and like going to the river to paint and learning how to like listen to like the place that I was in a deep way. Um, and I've lived in a couple places since then. So there's a couple different watersheds I was engaging with, the Roanoke River, the Greenbrier River, which is where I currently live, and the James River were some of the main ones. And there's different ways that I was, I guess, plein air painting, like on-site painting. Like some of them are like studies of what I was seeing, but a lot of times then I would take those studies of what I was seeing back to the studio and scale them up and abstract them a little bit. And those abstraction processes, I guess, were just a way of like going deeper into the experience. And it was also developing some kind of language with the paint that's like about flow and cycles. I was also thinking a lot about the book Pilgrim at Tinker Creek when I was creating these works. Annie Dillard, the author, spent a year at Tinker Creek, which is in Roanoke, and she was observing the seasons and all the little details of like, oh, that's what the muskrat does, or like, there's those cicadas coming out every 17 years. And she does so with a lot of like attentiveness and care and noticing both the beauty and the violence inherent in the landscape. And I think that's a lot of what I'm doing when I'm making art is like learning how to hold both end of a lot of things. Like there's room for all these things, and like painting, I guess, is a process that helps me to um expand that ability. And she has this quote that like beauty is not a hoax, but the surprising thing is that I forget it. Um, so by engaging with my watershed, by making things, it helps me to like be able to see beauty with new eyes, even when we're in like challenging situations or struggling to like see those details. So my hope is that when viewers come into the exhibit, they can see like, oh, there's lots of different like ways of experiencing water. Hopefully bring like I guess your stories of watersheds and waterways that have shaped you into the exhibit and can find like some resonance in that. Um, yeah. Yeah, so I have a decent number of opportunities to lead like workshops or art as like prayer or reflection kind of things. And I like to encourage people that everyone's an artist, that like cooking and cleaning and writing and anything we do is part of this creative practice. And also like drawing at its core, like if you can write your name or you can like move an instrument across a page, like you can draw. So with those drawings, it was like invitation to make a mark and participate on these pieces of paper. They were part of an interfaith vigil at um, the river near me because the Mountain Valley Pipeline was resuming construction, and that was something really heavy on our minds and hearts. Just like this massive fracked gas line that has an impact on our local communities, but also on our climate in general in a not positive way. So how do we like lament that and transform that into something new? So the inviting people to draw was a part of that process, along with the other rituals and offerings people brought. And then I painted the rest of the piece while the like prayer service was happening, while people were speaking and singing. So I was like standing in the river and just like trusting my intuition as the paint's going everywhere. But I had done some preparation, like deciding the general composition based on a song that was being sung at it. And like I guess I'm good at setting myself a container and having something to respond to. And then once I'm in this space, I just kind of let it do its thing and just non-judgmentally trust it to come out.
I,
Um, but I was thinking about those paintings a lot over the past year.
yes.
Yeah, so at the end of college, I was doing some oil painting and I had a great time, but I was like, okay, in terms of like where I am, it's not as like practical or feasible to use oil because it's so messy and I make so much stuff that to put everything on a canvas just would not really work for me. So when I graduated college, I was like, okay, what is in these oil paintings? There's about six, I think, oil paintings in the exhibit. Like, what's happening in them that I can like find in these other mediums that I also just like naturally gravitate towards. So that took me a couple of years, I think, to like get to that point. But some colored pencil drawing started to emerge where I was like, oh, that's doing the thing. Like I can make these things on paper. So there's some colored pencil drawings. There's these water soluble crayons that I like to use. There's a couple watercolor studies. There's some pulp paper things, the Greenbrier's flowing pieces that we talked about that were kind of collaborative. And yeah, I tend to work in like little like bursts, I guess, or like things come up and I'm like, ooh, this is interesting. And I make like maybe 10 or 12 of these pieces. And then it turns into something else. And then those themes end up coming back around. So I can see that happening in like this exhibit. And I think I framed everything myself or built like the stretchers for everything, which that seemed to be the hardest or most challenging part. I have access to like wood shop and carpentry skills through the work I'm doing. So I was like, makes sense for me to do it. But sometimes I can be like, the thing doesn't want to live in a frame right now. It wants to keep like moving. Um, but it was, I think, a good practice to be like, okay, these things just all want to live together in this art exhibit and be shared. So I'm gonna like honor that by creating like structures that um, support that purpose. Yeah, it felt like some kind of threshold thing of like, okay, like I shared this work, now I have freedom to do whatever I'm doing. I mean, I've always had that freedom. But I guess a couple of things I'm thinking about. I think just about like creative process cycle in general. I think I've spent a lot of time in the seeds and experimentation phases. Rick Rubin's Creative Act book talks about this a little. And I think I'm moving a little towards like, what does it look like for me to like finish like something that's a little bit more of a larger project? Like, what if I do make those large paper drawings that I keep thinking about based on all these small pieces that I've done? Or what if I make more of these pulp paper things but at a larger scale? So I'm thinking about that. I I think in general, like just playing with a lot of mark making right now. Conversation I had with an art professor a couple of weeks ago was like, yeah, like what does it mean to like, I guess, let the drawings breathe or like be the shape that they want to be versus just like containing them in a small square, like letting the drawing kind of lead the way, instead of me just like making it. So I'm kind of pondering that. And I've been going through a lot of my old drawings and asking myself, like, which ones do I need to keep? Which ones do I need to let go of? Which is always a hard process. Like, the editing. Um, so I think that's like letting the next thing emerge. And then printmaking is something that I haven't been able to do as much in the last couple of years because I don't have like a print studio near me, but it's a way of working that I'm interested in at some point getting back into. And there's ways probably I can do it just like um without a printing press. Most of the pieces in that exhibit were pretty like quick in the like putting the paint on, like the thing just like happened pretty quick, but I think it's because I make so much stuff that I'm able to like move through things like in kind of like a burst, if that makes sense. Um, so like say those envisioning pieces, I made those during a board meeting. So it was like, I guess like a 6 hour meeting. So I just sat on the floor and I made like 15 of them. And that is one of my favorite things to do is like be in a space where I am just like interpreting or experience like processing the experience through drawing. And I make a lot of work that way. And then some of those bigger, like say the oil paintings, I would work on a couple at a time. And so it took a little time probably to build the frames and like prepare the surface. And then I might have worked on them for a week or two. Sometimes I'll set like constraints for myself or more like a container, I guess, where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start this piece this day. It needs to be done by this other time. And sometimes there's like a significance to it. Like I think about like liturgical seasons. So I had like one painting that I finished like on Easter and it represented that time um, of like preparing for Easter and thinking broadly of Easter as a time of like renewal or resurrection or transformation. Um, so yeah, once in a while, I can get myself into a longer piece, but in general, at least right now, probably based on like all the other things I'm doing, it's like fast, but a lot of stuff. Preparing for this exhibit, I think revealed a lot to me or like helped me like, oh yeah, I'm doing this art thing. And I can trust myself to keep taking steps in that direction while also trusting like I'm an artist no matter if my job title tells me that or not. But I am looking at different grad school programs or art in residency kind of things. So I think that is the direction I'm headed. Um, and I don't have any exhibits planned right now. I think I need a little bit of space just to like play without deadline. And when the place emerges, and I'm like, oh, this would be a really great place to like share work, to say yes to that. So yeah, continuing to make art, continuing to share art, and continuing to like build relationships. It's kind of where I'm at. Yeah, I guess I'll just say, I feel like having a creative practice has just taught me a lot about like listening really deeply and like learning how to be really present in each moment. And I feel like that's something that we really need in our communities in this world is like learning how to listen and just yeah, be open and responsive in the deepest way possible. I guess I'm thinking about that especially on like election day. Like we don't know how it's going to unfold, but trusting like we still have agency to like see the beauty that exists and to like honor that and create together something new.